Wanda Maximoff was born with her twin brother Pietro years ago under mysterious circumstances. As children, they were taken by the High Evolutionary. This villain experimented on the twins, giving them superpowers, but was apparently disgusted with the result. He returned them to their home, Wundagore Mountain, located on the eastern European country of Transia, disguising them as ordinary members of the mutant race. Growing up here, raised by a family called the Maximoffs, they first discovered their powers. Pietro developed the ability to move at an incredible speed, while Wanda found herself infused with powerful, chaotic magic, though it would take her years to even begin to properly master these powers. It should be noted that the exact details of how Wanda got these abilities are unclear. It seems as though the High Evolutionary merely unlocked this latent power that was already within Wanda. A demon named Chthon would later claim to be the true source of the Scarlet Witch's power. However, the details of this are still unknown. Eventually, the twins' foster parents were thought killed, and the two were rescued by a mutant named Magneto. Believing themselves to be mutants who owed this man a debt for their lives, Wanda and Pietro were recruited by Magneto. They adopted the personas of the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and would come into conflict with the X-Men during this time. Eventually, Magneto was captured, and the two, already reluctant to take up Magneto's more villainous beliefs and behaviors, abandoned the man's brotherhood of evil mutants and joined the ranks of the Avengers. At the time, the original Avengers had disbanded, and the two were recruited by Captain America as part of an entirely new team, including Hawkeye, another villain attempting to reform himself, and one who would go on to be a close friend and colleague of Wanda. This period of Wanda's life as a superhero largely relied on her basic hex abilities that she had developed at a young age, not yet realizing the full extent of her abilities. Though Wanda briefly lost her powers and left the team, she quickly got them back and rejoined the Avengers, working with them for years to keep the world safe. It was during this period that the twins first learned that Magneto was apparently their real father, while Wanda met and fell in love with the android named Vision. The two eventually got married, and using chaotic magic, Wanda was able to create two children for them to raise together, naming the boys Tommy and Billy. It was eventually discovered that these children were actually created out of the demon Mephisto's power, and when this being reformed himself out of his dispersed power across the universe, they were destroyed in the process. Meanwhile, all of this was apparently the result of the time-traveling villain named Immortus, who was meddling in the whole affair as he feared the powers of the children Wanda Maximoff would one day have. This left Vision and Wanda with a strained relationship, and they separated. In spite of this, the two remained teammates and moved to the West Coast to join its iteration of the Avengers. During this time, Wanda worked with a special computer designed by Iron Man to work with her hex abilities, allowing the team to identify the most pressing issues at hand. She was even appointed the leader of this team, though she often came in conflict with Tony Stark, who would frequently encroach on her position. These conflicts within the team would eventually lead to it being dissolved, and Wanda joined the ranks of a new team named Force Works. By then, her and Wonder Man had fallen in love with each other. Wanda found this hero, real name Simon Williams, appealing, as it was Simon's brain that the Vision was based on. Once again, this relationship ended in tragedy as Simon was killed during the Force Works' first mission. A devastated Wanda worked with this team for a while as best she could after this, but issues with leadership and the trauma of Simon's death meant they would quietly disband not long after forming. Wanda rejoined the Avengers and began to take an interest in training with her powers and abilities. With the help of a woman named Agatha Harkness, Wanda first started to tap into her true chaotic abilities. She started to greatly increase her power and could reliably alter reality the way she first did when she created her children. Though it was later learned just where Wanda got this power from, for a while the Avengers simply believed this was the result of training. Using this new power, Wanda was able to resurrect Wonder Man, and during this time Wanda reconciled with the Vision as best they could, and at the very least they once again could call each other friends. Meanwhile, she began to develop romantic feelings for another team member, this time Captain America. However, this relationship did not develop. Wanda's true abilities started to have a profound effect on her well-being and mental health, something she managed to hide from the rest of the team for some time. No longer limited by the already vague constraints of chaotic magic, the Scarlet Witch began to harness true power over reality itself. The change appeared to have a profound effect on Wanda's psychology and perspective about life. The various traumas the woman had endured, most especially the disappearance of her children, started to weigh heavily on the woman, and she suffered a nervous breakdown. Her magic lashed out in strange ways, attacking Avengers and her friends, leading to the deaths of multiple superheroes, including the Vision and Hawkeye, two of her closest teammates. The attack was so devastating and painful for the Avengers, for a time the team disbanded completely. Wanda was taken in by Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto, who did their best to care for her. They were unsuccessful, and instead Wanda attempted to bring the Vision back to life and undo her earlier actions. To prevent Wanda from doing something catastrophic with her powers, affecting all of reality as they know it, Xavier was forced to put her in a coma and call together a number of superheroes. The surviving Avengers gathered with the X-Men to discuss the very real possibility of having to kill Wanda, who, if truly unstable, could destroy everything. Quicksilver, horrified these alleged heroes would seriously consider something like this, managed to alert Wanda and convince her to stop the heroes from hurting her. And in an instant, the worst fears of Xavier were realized. Wanda rewrote history to put mutants, especially her family, at the very top of society. The world became beholden to the House of M, with Magneto serving as the undisputed ruler of mutant and mankind alike. Wanda, at long last, was reunited with her children, and they lived a happy life of comfort, power, and privilege together. Unfortunately for her, one mutant began to remember the world as it was, and began to restore the memory of other heroes as well. Pretty quickly, the House of M fell apart. When Magneto himself had his memory restored, in a rage, he attacked and lashed out at Quicksilver, blaming him for everything and killing his own son. Wanda proceeded to return the world back to how it was, reviving her brother, but still left deeply traumatized. She lashed out at her so-called father, blaming the man for constantly choosing his cause for mutants over his own two children. Wanda once again changed the world with 3 simple words: no more mutants. To this day, it is commonly referred to as the worst moment in mutant history. With 3 words, an Omega-level mutant wiped out 90% of the world's mutant population. Many instantly lost their powers, while others, unable to survive as an ordinary human due to their altered bodies, died on the spot. The mutant race, once the burgeoning future of this world, suddenly became a race on the brink of extinction, with less than 200 surviving mutants left on the planet, and few prospects for long-term survival. Having thoroughly made herself a pariah among the mutant race and the Avengers, Wanda disappeared. As a result of Wanda's frequent alterations of reality, Hawkeye was resurrected. Remembering exactly what happened to him, Clint Barton tracked Wanda down to a small village near Wundagore Mountain. He saved her from a thief and discovered she was apparently living without memory of her life as a superhero or the formidable power she once had. Hawkeye spent the night with her and eventually found evidence that her powers were not really gone. Nevertheless, Clint chose not to press the matter further and left, keeping the discovery to himself. Beast, seeking to restore the mutant race, also discovered her living here, but given the same story by Wanda, who even claimed to him that magic wasn't real, he too chose to leave her alone. Meanwhile, the young Avengers, Wiccan and Speed, had emerged. These boys had grown up separate from one another, but met when a failsafe program formed a new team of Avengers out of members of a list compiled by Vision. Given this information and the fact that they both have the same names as Wanda's children did, they suspected Wanda was their real mother and sought her out. However, unlike when the others looked for her, she was nowhere to be found. Wanda stayed out of the public eye for some time after this, though the powerful artifact called the Eye of Agamotto could still sense her presence in this world, yet it was unable to detect any of her former magical power. For a time, Loki used her image to manipulate the Avengers, and for a while many thought she had truly returned. Yet a great deal of mystery still surrounded Wanda, and Loki was unable to provide answers to any of it. His deception was eventually discovered when confronted by the young Avengers. None of this was very satisfying for the many heroes who knew and loved Wanda. This was a woman who was a true hero and friend to them, but the events of her life just didn't add up. Powerful individuals ranging from Immortus, Mephisto, to the High Evolutionary all took an interest in her, while the circumstances surrounding her children and their apparent disappearance simply didn't make sense. This was further confused by the presence of Wiccan and Speed, who were increasingly convinced Wanda was their real mother. Something clearly had happened to Wanda that greatly increased her power, but it changed her in a very disturbing and subtle way. Everything came to a head when Wiccan finally found Wanda living in Latveria. Still apparently without powers or memory of her life as an Avenger, Wanda revealed she was engaged to the ruler of this land, Victor Von Doom. Confused, Wiccan began to explain everything as he understood it, but before he could finish, the young Avengers, and Magneto all arrived, each with their own motivations. A massive battle unfolded, and Wolverine attacked Wanda, outright attempting to kill her in revenge for the mutant race and out of fear for what she might do. The young Avenger named Iron Lad was forced to escape with Wanda and the rest of his teammates in order to save her life. Thanks to Iron Lad's time-traveling powers, they were able to briefly hide in the past, where Wanda was confronted by one of her many victims. This encounter restored the Scarlet Witch's memories, and she immediately returned everyone to the present, along with Scott Lang, who by then had died in the present day. Wanda confirmed that Wiccan and Speed were indeed her children, reincarnated by her some time ago and having grown up without her, in order to keep them safe from all of this. Wanda then planned on restoring the powers of every mutant she had taken their special abilities from. However, Doom then chose to reveal his hand in all of this. He was the one responsible for the vast increase in the woman's powers when she came to him, years ago, wanting to restore her children. He made a conduit for the raw power of life itself, explaining her near limitless abilities. And though Wanda was indeed successful in bringing not only these children back, but also Wonder Man, it led to her deterioration and attack on the Avengers and the mutant race. Suddenly, this power was transferred onto Doom. The tremendous energy that had overwhelmed Wanda proved too much for Doom as well. Victor promptly fled, and the Scarlet Witch found herself more or less restored. Though not quite as powerful as she had once been, Wanda retained her connection to chaotic magic and life energy itself. In the aftermath, Captain America offered her a chance to return to the Avengers, but Wanda instead chose to spend time with her family. The X-Men agreed to put their grievances with her aside. After all, by then, they had other, more important things to worry about. The young mutant named Hope Summers, the only mutant born since Wanda's destruction of the mutant race, had returned to the X-Men after being raised in hiding by the mutant Cable in the future. Almost immediately, the Phoenix Force sensed her return and began to head straight towards Earth. Knowing all too well the power of this cosmic entity, and its tendency to take an interest in the mutant race, the Avengers panicked and demanded the X-Men hand over Hope. When they refused, the two superhero teams went to war with one another, violently clashing before the Phoenix's arrival. Wanda went to the Avengers mansion in order to help, but she was coldly refused entry by Vision, still bitter about the violent attack she committed against the team, and the android itself on these very grounds. The Phoenix Force was inadvertently split into 5 entities among the X-Men, who were overwhelmed by this power and began to conquer the Earth. The Scarlet Witch was able to successfully convince Hope Summers to flee the possessed X-Men, and Cyclops, one of the 5 possessed by the Phoenix, set his sights on capturing the pair. Gradually, the man gained the full power of the Phoenix Force as the other 4 segments returned to him, and the now unstable and all-powerful Summers began to relentlessly pursue Wanda and Hope. The two agreed to join forces to confront Scott and the Phoenix Force, and together, at long last, and with the passive assistance of Iron Man, they were able to defeat the Phoenix Force and finally restore the mutant race. With new mutants finally emerging on Earth once more, things began to feel hopeful once again, for the first time in a very long time for the woman. Wanda finally was able to return to the Avengers, joining Captain America's Avengers Unity Squad, a new team of Avengers specifically dedicated to representing X-Men, Avengers, and later Inhumans. Wanda had a great deal of success during this time making amends with both the X-Men and Avengers, most especially Wolverine, who she started to value as a friend once more. She was a vital member of this team in confronting enemies such as the Apocalypse Twins and the Red Skull. The latter gained tremendous power after he stole the brain of the recently deceased Charles Xavier, giving the villain the Professor's incredible telepathic abilities. In an effort to defeat the Red Skull, whose full power converted him into a being calling himself Red Onslaught, a massive group of heroes and villains were gathered together on the island of Genosha. When even this wasn't enough to overcome the Red Onslaught, Scarlet Witch and Dr. Doom worked together to conduct a massive spell to alter the fundamental moral disposition of Red Onslaught. Though the spell worked, it accidentally affected everyone on the island, turning villain into hero, and hero into villain. Now corrupted, Wanda turned violent and attacked Dr. Doom in revenge for his many years of manipulation and influence on her. A now heroic Magneto and Quicksilver tried to stop her, only for Wanda to discover that Eric wasn't really her father all along. Doom was able to use this distraction to flee the battle, and Wanda was later possessed so that she could be forced to cast the inversion spell once more, returning her back to her normal heroic self, though one now aware of her past still having a great deal of mystery to it, far more than she ever realized. The twins returned to Wundagore Mountain for answers. They learned about the actions of the High Evolutionary that occurred during their childhood, and with the help of the Avengers Unity Squad, were able to defeat the villain. With all these revelations, Wanda began to operate on her own as well as an Avenger. She began to sense a disruption of magic and learn the nature of her real mother. She also started drifting apart from her brother, who she was viewing as increasingly amoral, while avoiding getting involved in the second superhero civil war, feeling her powers would only make that conflict more dangerous. Wanda was one of many heroes that attempted to stop Captain America, who was secretly made into a Hydra agent, from taking over the United States. She failed and was possessed by a powerful being, an old enemy of Wanda called Chthon. She was later freed by Doctor Strange, but until then proved a powerful, though unhinged, enforcer and an important part of Hydra's own iteration of the Avengers. To date, Wanda remains a core member of the Avengers Unity Squad. In spite of years of abuse at the hands of many villains who sought to use her powers for themselves, countless lies and half-truths surrounding her own history, and a rather devastating battle with mental health, Wanda has overcome it all, and for most of her adult life was a helpful and vital Avenger. Instrumental in saving the world a dozen times over from the likes of Ultron, Gravitron, Morgan Le Fay, and many other threats, particularly those of a magical nature. Though her powers make her a dangerous and risky asset, few can match her magical abilities and control over probability itself, let alone chaos. With an array of applications to her abilities so wide and massive, it seems there's little that Wanda couldn't theoretically do if pushed or given sufficient energy. However, this power does not come without a cost or unforeseen side effects, especially when taken to its extremes. To that end, Wanda Maximoff is both one of the best Avengers one could ask for, but also one of the most terrifying. Dr. June Covington was a postgraduate working at New York University when she met Edward Wine, a brilliant biologist, perfect in every way to her, save one small birth defect on his left arm. Fascinated with this, June spent a year working to perfect a human being's genetic code. When she approached Edward, he rejected her, and after discovering she developed this technique using questionable methods and experimenting on herself, he turned her over to campus police. Later, June once again approached Edward, claiming to have learned her lesson. She managed to lure him to her old lab, where she promptly left him paralyzed and sealed him inside in an act of revenge. Now harvesting the genetic code of various creations and other people with powers, June enhanced her own body with a wide array of abilities based on the genes she had harvested. Her bones would reduce impact and the damage of it. Her body could bend and dislocate itself easily, while she grew gills that allowed her to breathe underwater and without the usual need for her mouth and nose. June gained the ability to endure pain like no ordinary human being, and was able to augment herself to create force fields and thermal blasts out of her body. With a genetic sample, she could track down any subject and would gain a telepathic influence over them. Her blood became poison to others, able to kill a normal person within 10 seconds. June developed her own supervillain persona, calling herself Toxie Doxie. After being caught murdering 18 people, June was taken and kept in the Special Containment Center, a top-secret underwater prison for the most dangerous psychopaths on Earth. There she met Norman Osborn after he was imprisoned following the Madman's attempt to conquer the city of Asgard. When Norman escaped, he decided to form a new team of Dark Avengers, one working outside of the public grace for Norman's own nefarious purposes. June took on the namesake of the Scarlet Witch and began a romantic relationship with Norman. She came into conflict with the real Avengers, where June proved a formidable force in battle, able to nearly kill Doctor Strange. Eventually, the Avengers managed to track the Dark Avengers down and defeated the team when the Hulk's son, Scar, betrayed the villainous group. June and her colleagues were imprisoned, and after the Thunderbolts went missing, The Dark Avengers were recruited to replace them as a government-sanctioned team. Injected with nanites to keep her and her colleagues under control, June and the others were placed under the command of a very reluctant Luke Cage. They proved surprisingly competent during this time, though June almost managed to escape government custody. During this attempt, she and several others were accidentally transported to an alternate world. She met an alternate version of Hank Pym and became fascinated with his many technological advances here. They were able to save the others that were taken here and escape back to the original Earth. June and the other Dark Avengers, now free of the nanites thanks to their time in this other world, disbanded and fled before they could be captured again. No longer a part of the Dark Avengers in any form, June abandoned the title of the Scarlet Witch, returning to her old identity as Toxie Doxie. After the Terrigen bomb created many new Inhumans on Earth, June was able to use one to further enhance her own powers, likely giving her immunity to detection by any technology. After a battle against a scientific organization called AIM, June was defeated by the hero Spider-Girl, and is, presumably, incarcerated once more. When Wanda learned she was not Magneto's child, she discovered that the Maximoffs, originally thought to be the adoptive family of Pietro and Wanda, were actually the biological relatives of the twins. Wanda learned that their real mother's name was Natalya Maximoff, a woman who actually used to call herself the Scarlet Witch. The title had been passed down from generation to generation, throughout the history of the Maximoff family. It was a well-kept secret, and much of the history of this woman and her ancestry are still unknown, but Natalya did have some dealings with the Bloodstone family, and it was likely they were involved in protecting the world from mystical threats. Though unlike Wanda, Natalya managed to stay out of the public eye. Whether or not this means that Wanda's powers are a unique aspect of her genetic heritage, or if these powers have been given to the Maximoff woman by the demon Chthon, is not known at this time. But it is worth noting Chthon has always been associated with Wonder War Mountain, as have been the Maximoffs. Natalya served as the Scarlet Witch for years, until she had her children, and they were kidnapped by the High Evolutionary. Apparently, she died trying to save her children. Not long after this discovery, Wanda would encounter her mother's spirit itself. Natalya helped her daughter heal a mystical problem affecting a region of Ireland, and though they were successful at this, it came at the cost of Natalya's soul. Before it was consumed, Natalya warned Wanda that it was not the High Evolutionary that killed her, but Wanda's biological father. Who this man is, and why he did what he did, is unknown. Yet it is likely Wanda will need to one day seek answers from the Scarlet Warlock. A handful of others have taken on this mantle of the Scarlet Witch over the years. Wanda was once cloned by a villain, only for the clone to be killed by Magneto. A Skrull duplicate was created as part of the alien invasion on Earth, while Jean Grey also briefly took on the mantle of Scarlet Witch during one mission. Across the multiverse, an infinite number of variations of all superheroes exist, and Wanda is no exception. Many of these have served as Avengers or are members of various takes of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and none of them are creepy or weird at all. At all! At all! Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my origins bio for the 3 Scarlet Witches. So a little while back, I put on our weekly Patreon poll a few topics for a series of characters for an origins and bio. We've done this before with The Flash and Robin and a few other characters, so I figured it was time to come back to this again. I put on there a few characters ranging from like Superman to I don't even remember who else, but more popular choices that I kind of expected to be the main competition. But as I was doing research for this, I noticed there was more than one version of Scarlet Witch in the main canon of Marvel, which surprised me. I did not know that. And I'm guessing a lot of people didn't either, because this is what ended up winning the poll, which is great because I get to talk about something a little different from our usual thing, and with the Infinity War coming up, it felt worth talking about this character. Wanda Maximoff has been a long-standing member of the Avengers, going pretty much back to the beginning of this superhero team. And her connection to like Magneto and therefore the X-Men was very helpful in giving the early Marvel days of canon some thoroughfare throughout like the various titles, when early on those connections were less apparent. The other the other Scarlet Witches are very different in that I didn't know about them at all. One is pretty much just another Miss Marvel villain back when that was Carol Danvers. The other one, though, I really like the idea of. This concept of Scarlet Witch being an inherited title that goes back generations. It gives a little bit of something extra for the whole Sinti Roma backstory of Scarlet Witch and Pietro, Quicksilver. And it's kind of interesting. Gives some meaning to her superhero mantle and why she chose that name. So that's pretty cool. Overall, she's an interesting character, though it's funny looking back on it all now because for a long time she was a real sticking point within Marvel canon. This is the woman who basically went crazy and tore down the Avengers and the X-Men at the time, almost wiping out the mutant race. So for the sake of plot convenience, Marvel essentially sold her character out and did it in a way at the disservice of how people with mental illness are treated and at her own character, who was a superhero before this. So there's a real gray area in between Scarlet Witch's history from, her rich origins as a proper Avenger to her current status as, once again, a proper Avenger. But that middle chunk, there was a lot of animosity directed at this character for good reason. Not in people being like, how could she destroy the X-Men, but just because of what Marvel turned her into. So, it seems quaint now. Looking over it, it was just kind of an adorable chapter in Marvel history because all that stuff is in the past. Decimation is long behind us, as are the whole Avengers disassembled nonsense. And part of that stems from the frankly different and weird relationship this woman had with Vision, but that's cool. We get so many boring takes on robotic characters and superheroes and the world of sci-fi and fantasy. This was genuinely different and became about love, which was a very progressive, we'll say, take on how artificial intelligence is treated, especially in the Western world and most especially in America. Usually robots are something to be feared, not loved, so I like that it's different, and it's willing to explore something beyond the most basic, lazy concepts of, the iRobot movie. If you want to talk about robots, read the iRobot book by Isaac Asimov, which has a far more nuanced and interesting take on the whole robotics and stuff like that. He didn't have a simple view of the future the way someone who might have just seen the Will Smith movie might think. But we're getting a little aside of ourselves. But not really, because Vision's a huge part of Scarlet Witch, and it's not only did they fall in love, but they had children together. And in spite of some pretty crazy stuff involving those children, apparently being the spawn of Satan or something like that, that's not true anymore. And those kids are around still, which is kind of interesting. So I like Scarlet Witch as a character, and I think she's a valuable part of the Avengers. She provides an interesting side of things that the others don't necessarily serve, existing not only with one foot in the realm of magic, but also being a mutant when it's not a huge legal issue with the MCU, or just the hex powers and the whole chaos idea are very interesting. In terms of recommended reading, my first choice would definitely be the Kirk Busiek era of Avengers, kind of Avengers Disassembled. It features a lot of great stories with Ultron and that sort of stuff, and real strong classic Avengers stories. Ones that didn't really overshoot their ambitions, but just had a good team setting dealing with superhero content, but also being pretty dark and formidable in what they say. Alright, my camera's running out of battery. Otherwise, the Children's Crusade with the Young Avengers is great. And the best one of all, no, not the best one of all, but something that's really interesting is the solo Scarlet Witch series. That's really well done, and it's just nice to have something different. We get so many solo series just of Captain America and Spider-Man. Having Scarlet Witch is a cool character and something unique for her as a solo series. And it's by James Robinson and seems pretty interesting on the whole. And that's about it. I'm running out of time here, so thanks for watching. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.